Almost a year ago, I decided to quit my job as a full-time doctor. Since then, I've travelled more than ever before, moved back home to the side of the world I came from, and successfully planned and participated in my own wedding. And I cannot believe how quickly this insane year has passed and how I'm already here sitting on the other side of it all. I was watching my last update video recently, and to be honest, I was an absolute hot mess in it. Sometimes I just think about it like, what are you doing? Which makes sense because I was really quite lost. Since then, a lot of time has passed and I wanted to talk about what I've been up to and some things that I'm thinking. For those of you who are new here or like me don't know what I'm doing with my life, here is a quick recap. My name is Surina. I graduated as a doctor 4 years ago and worked for the first 2 years in the UK, where I was born, studied, and lived for all my life. Then I did a big move to Australia, where I worked for 1 year full-time in Brisbane. I've got quite a few videos about that on my channel. And then last September, I quit that job, and what followed was a pretty wild stretch of time where I was locuming, but mainly travelling. I've been trying to resurrect this channel multiple times, but to be honest, it's just been a whirlwind of one thing after another. I kind of had it in my head that having a whole year completely career-free would be so freeing for doing more of this stuff, more of what I consider to be a hobby really, but I really underestimated how much discipline it required and also how hard it is to do without a base where you've got all your filming and editing stuff set up, and being on the move all the time and pretty much living out of a suitcase for the best part of a year was not actually the best environment to keep up with this. But I'm very excited to be back now, and please let me know in the comments below or messaging me on Instagram what more you want to see from me. So, career updates. If you've been following me and watched some of my videos, you'll know that I made the decision to ultimately come back to the UK, and I started applying to the surgical training programme in the UK all the way back last November. At the time, that involved putting together my portfolio and submitting that. After that came a very irritating and irrelevant exam in January. Then there were interviews in March. And if you follow me on Instagram, you will know the outcome. But I just wanted to talk a little bit about the surgical training application process in the UK that I was going through. I'm telling myself not to fall into a complete pit of ranting and moaning here, which I might, so I'll just summarise that to spare us all. Essentially, the surgical application process has been changing year on year, but this year they took it upon themselves to change absolutely every aspect of the portfolio at very last minute notice, which made the whole portfolio game very, very difficult to play. They also introduced a new exam, which was largely based on medical knowledge and situational judgment type questions with almost no surgical component whatsoever. And this was because they did not have enough assessors for the interviews, and so they wanted to kind of cull, maybe cull's not the right word, they wanted to filter through all the candidates and make sure less people got to interview because they didn't have the capacity to interview everyone who would have otherwise made it to that stage. This meant a lot of things that I and many people who were also applying this year had done for the portfolio were now not worth any points, and it also meant I had to study for another exam while travelling. This is a national application process, so for everything you do, you get points, and based on your final score, you get ranked amongst everyone who has applied in the country. So you are getting points for your portfolio, for the exam, and then if you get put forward for an interview, for the interview as well, and that total score will determine where you rank amongst all the other candidates that have applied for surgical training that year. You also rank every surgical job in the country, so this year there were about 500 or so, based on their location and the rotations that they are offering. Then your overall candidate score that you get determines where you rank and which choice job you get within your rankings. After the portfolio was submitted and the exam was sat, came a lot of questionable communication, or lack thereof, with people not being told if they had an interview or not, being rejected out of the blue, and deadlines for when we were meant to be told things being completely missed. At this point I was thinking, why am I doing this? Why am I coming back to the nightmare that is NHS admin? But I was in too deep now, so I just had to carry on wading through. After all of that, I was very grateful to be invited to an interview, but because of the doctor strike dates, more on that later, a lot of the pre-arranged interview dates were wiped out. So then I was in the situation where I could choose to do an interview right at the beginning of the interview period, which would give me very little preparation time, or because of a holiday I had in the middle, to do one of the last interview dates, which would mean that that holiday, which was a 1 week massive group holiday in Bali, would be very much spent doing interview prep. And although it probably made more sense to have more time for preparation, I valued a good sesh in Bali a lot more and went for the very early dates so I could free myself up for that holiday. This did mean a lot of self-inflicted stress because I literally had about a week to prepare, and this involved spending those 5 or 6 days pretty much locked in this grotty motel room in Brisbane, where I literally didn't leave apart from getting morning coffee or picking up the delivery order from outside. Side story, why did I choose a grotty motel room? Well, firstly, it was very well located and of course cheap, but most importantly, the reviews specifically talked about how good the internet was and how fast it was, which was very important for an online job interview. And of course, 12 seconds before my interview started, the internet completely cut out, and it was really, really stressful. I had to quickly grab my phone and hotspot and just pray everything worked, which it did. But yeah, that was a really bad investment of accommodation. Luckily, throughout all of this, I had my partner, who you may know that I moved to Australia with, and he is also applying for surgical training, which was so useful because we could just practice on each other. Speaking of him, this would be a good time to talk about my mindset or considerations I was having at this point in time. If you know me, you know I question this career path and the work-life balance it can offer me all the time. Ultimately, I'm constantly asking myself which parts of the job and lifestyle are worth it to me and which are not. And of course, this is changing all the time. So what did I actually want at this stage? I have to say I was going in with it with a pretty clear definition of what was acceptable to me. I definitely wanted a surgical training job. I wasn't really willing to try for any other specialities or even any other non-training jobs in the UK. I knew that if I was coming back, I definitely wanted to start progressing in my career, and there wasn't really anything apart from surgery that I would be happy to progress in. The second important criteria was that it absolutely had to be in the same area or vicinity as my partner, who was also applying. You would think that wouldn't be so much to ask for, but it could not be further from the truth. This detail was actually the most stressful of the entire process. Like I said, this application process is a national one, so you are ranking all the jobs available in the whole country, and depending on your performance as a candidate will determine where you end up. It is very difficult to get competitive locations such as London or any of the big cities really, and so it's hard to get a location that you want, but even harder to get it in the same place as someone else that you're applying with. There's no way to link your applications or even ask for any special considerations, so it's kind of a lot of pressure for both of you to make sure you perform well enough to be able to have that choice. This is a big issue that a lot of medics, especially medic couples, will relate to. I've got quite a few friends who've actually been put in 2 different hospitals which are not commutable from each other at all, and so they're having to live separately, which is absolutely absurd in terms of your quality of life, in terms of your affordability of how to afford living, you know, not with your partner, etc. So if that was a situation I was put in, I was not really willing to accept that either. For me, this career needs to work for me as much as I am willing to work for it. And so if these 2 criteria of speciality and location weren't met, I was pretty happy in my head to explore other options, be that locuming for a year or exploring the teaching side of medicine more through university affiliations or through online courses which could be made into bigger projects. So I was going in with a pretty open mindset, both willing to give surgical training a go, but also open to other outcomes outside of this. Anyway, then I got a surgical training job in my first choice location in Bristol, and I was like, oh shit. So we're doing this. So yeah, that is where I have been, and this is where I am now in Bristol, about to go back to the NHS after a 2-year break as a surgical trainee. Going forward, I am cautiously optimistic and nervously excited. On the plus side, I definitely feel ready to now tackle the challenge of training and progressing in my career. A feeling I definitely didn't have at the end of my foundation training, and even after a year out of the NHS, still didn't feel ready for. So I'm really glad I took a proper break to put me back into that headspace where I'm feeling energized to start learning again and be challenged again. and actually just looking forward to learning how to do surgery. I know it's not going to be easy at times, but this break has really restored and replenished my stores of resilience, which I know you need for intense jobs like this, for example. Something I don't understand is that we are expected to have unlimited and unwavering amounts of resilience within us, no matter how intense the working conditions that are put upon us are, because it is what we signed up for. I don't agree with this because I think resilience is a finite resource within us that will run out and result in burnout or dissatisfaction with your job unless you take a break or slow things down or, change something within your support system. But yeah, I feel like my tank is now full again, and so I am ready to, go back and have things thrown at me within reason, which brings me to the negatives of going back, of which there seems to be a lot about working in healthcare in the UK right now. I know the media haven't been great at reporting or reporting accurately what's been going on, but hopefully most of you know that the doctors in the NHS have been striking again and again and again. We just had our, I think, third round of strikes, which was the longest continuous strike in NHS history, which hopefully gives an idea of the seriousness of the situation. Doctors' pay has been talked about endlessly, but now looking at the real-time numbers, the constant cuts that have kept doctors' pay well below the level of inflation, as well as the absolute shock of coming back to the UK and experiencing the cost of living crisis firsthand, it is seriously worrying. It's been worrying talking to my colleagues in the NHS and hearing about working conditions getting worse and worse, group morale getting lower and lower, and realising that the future of a doctor's career here is in serious danger. Secondly, if you've been following me for a while, you know that I have been very curious about a career in surgery, especially as a female, especially as someone who wants a good level of work-life balance. So I'm interested to see where that goes finally. I have been talking to people throughout my short career so far who are in similar situations to me, making sure I've been talking to a lot of female surgeons in particular to try and see if there is a little bit of hope in the otherwise stereotypically very male and potentially toxic environment that surgery gets a bad reputation for. Of course, things are changing, but I need to see for myself what that's going to look like. So that is another thing I am slightly cautious about. And of course, I'll be documenting my findings throughout, so make sure to subscribe or follow me over on Instagram to see how that journey goes. The key for my anxious little soul is to not think about things too long term. So before I was just concentrating on Australia and the couple of years there. Now that core surgical training is about to begin, these next 2 years are going to be my focus. And when that comes to an end, it will be time to reassess, refocus, and figure out what I want at that point in time and make decisions to help me get in that direction. So 2 important things I've learned over the last year is firstly that your career and you are not the same thing. It does not determine your worth, your happiness, or your identity, or at least it shouldn't. You can detach from it, you can detract from it, you can take different routes, come back to it, never come back, change it. It is a lot more flexible than you think it is. I've spoken to lots of consultants, especially over the last couple of years, asking about their routes, mostly female consultants because they're more of interest to me, and it turns out everyone pretty much has taken years out, gone abroad for a while, taken breaks to have families, to pursue other things. The more you question, the more you find out, and you'll see that there is more to it than at face value, especially when there's career paths laid out in a very linear fashion, which makes it look like you have to do everything in that order and within those time frames, but that's really not the case for real human life, where things happen, stuff changes, and you can be a bit more flexible than it looks like on paper. Secondly, based on that, is to always keep re-auditing your life. What I mean by that is to keep assessing what you want and what your values are at different points in your life, because this will keep changing. One of the things that really held me back from pursuing a career in surgery is expecting it not to align with my values and how I want to live my life. But the thing is, that's always changing, so it shouldn't put me off from a lifetime of career exploration just because at one point in life I might not feel it's right. When I didn't feel it was right, I took a step back, then I reassessed and actually was re-energized and feeling excited about pursuing surgery again, and now I'm in a space where I'm willing to give it a lot of time, give it a lot of my energy. I've signed up for an exam in a few months as well, just to take advantage of the high energy state I'm in at the moment, because that's going to come and go, and so how much I give to my career is going to come and go as well. And that's not always going to be completely fine-tuned and completely controllable, but you can keep making decisions in the general direction that you want. I think we think that once we've decided something, then we've made that decision forever, but that's absolutely not true. It is absolutely okay to change your mind, change gears, and rethink things a little at any point. So before I finish, I put out a little Instagram Q&A to finish this video with. Would you ever consider going back to Australia, and would you still recommend the move to others? Yes to both of those things. I would definitely reconsider going back. That door is absolutely not closed and very much a viable option in the future that I would consider. I'm really grateful that I had that time out there to understand how the system works, to make a few contacts, and to kind of get a foot in the door if I ever want to go back. And so based on that, I would definitely recommend the move to others. I know it's a really common thing that a lot of doctors are doing already, and it is great if you want to go and settle there and ultimately live and work there, but also just to go and see what it's like, and then you've got another door open for you in the future as well, should you ever want to go back. So I've got a few questions asking if I've completed my residency or where I am with my residency. So as mentioned in this video, I am about to start surgical training, so I've not actually been on any surgical training programs before. I've done surgical jobs and I've locumed in surgery, but I've never been an official trainee where I can start progressing and becoming more senior and having more responsibilities and eventually becoming a surgical consultant if I choose to stay till all the way through. What am I doing currently? Very much unemployed and have been for most of the year. It's been wonderful. I feel so lucky to be able to have done that. As I mentioned before, I have been doing some locum work to earn some money, but with savings and the increased amount of money you can make during locuming relative to the hours you work, it's been possible to have most of the year completely off, which has been really nice. I'm actually going back to work in like a week or so now, so yeah, it's kind of terrifying to think about going back to full-time work after such a long break. But yeah, I'm ready, I think. Somebody asked about how has the UK changed since you left. Guys, everything is so expensive. I was very much in a bubble for the last couple of years, hearing about things getting more expensive, but not really registering what that feels like. And wow, everything from finding a place to rent to getting a car to just going to the supermarket has been a wild experience. Really don't know when this is going to end and what limit we're going to keep going up to. I'm going to end it there. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in future videos. Bye.